The main question overall that we need to ask ourselves is, why do we feel the need to maintain this facade? Hey y'all, welcome to the From Surviving to Thriving podcast. You know, the place where we take the veil off and pull the curtains back on our everyday lives. I'm your host, Jackie. In today's episode, we will be discussing a topic that touches majority of us. We'll be dismantling the strong and the have it all together persona. You know, the mask that we all put on to hide our feelings, hide our struggles, and make it very difficult for people to see us for who we really are and what's really going on with us. Let's explore why we adopt this persona in the first place and how we can begin to dismantle it. Let's start off by defining what I mean by the strong and the have it all together persona. This is that idea that we have in our minds that we need to be stoic and self-sufficient, always composed and in control of what's going on in our lives. And remember, we just need to appear to be. Really, it's an appearance that we're putting up. We're putting on a mask that covers all of these insecurities that we have. People who exhibit the strong persona are typically the ones that people consider as their go-to person. So any issue that you might have, anytime you feel like you need a backup or a conversation or someone to chime in, that's usually the person that you run to. And they're oftentimes the ones that people consider to be like their rock, the person that you know is always going to be there. They're solid, they never waver on you. Those are the ones I'm talking about. This persona can develop from different aspects of our lives. For some of us, we develop this persona early on in life, and for some of us, we take it on when we're in certain situations, like for example at work, or some people, you will see it a lot on social media because they're trying to portray an image or project an image of what they think people think of them or believe them to be. Now, the reason why a lot of us do this is typically because society rewards the people that appear to be strong, have it all together, they're solid, they're unshakable, regardless of whatever situation they're in. Society tends to gravitate towards those people and, have so much positive things to say about them, because that's the image that they're projecting. But in reality, it's really only causing a lot of pressure internally on the people who are actually projecting this image. Keeping up with this illusion can be so detrimental to our mental health, emotional health, and can put a strain on a lot of our relationships. It tends to make the relationships feel to people like us as like a one-sided relationship. And technically, it's not really anyone's fault but our own. And I'll explain further later. The main question overall that we need to ask ourselves is, why do we feel the need to maintain this facade? From my recent experience in therapy, I have come to the realization that I've been wearing a mask for a very long time. I also realized that this mask came into play as a result or a response to my childhood traumas. It has been with me since then and has impacted all aspects of my life. So the first time I came to the realization that I have this strong, have it all together persona that I project out into the world was when I was explaining to my therapist that I felt like I poured everything that I had into so many people's cups, but I wasn't really getting the replenishment that I needed. And it got to the point where I just felt like I had enough. I was tired of doing that and I needed to rebuild myself. I seriously had to take a step back and try to figure out, why is it that the majority of the people that are closest to me don't typically reach out. So I started to, I guess, self-examine, because like I mentioned, this therapy period is about me. Instead of looking outward to find the answer, I wanted to look inward to figure out, what is it about me, or what is it that I'm doing that doesn't appear that I need the support and the help that I need. And one of the things that I actually did was, after I thought about it, I started to have conversations with some of the people that were closest to me. And I asked the question, I asked, why is it that you've never reached out to me and said, hey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? And I also said, have you ever noticed that I've never called and said, hey, can you do X, Y, and Z for me? The resounding response that I got from these people was, well, you look like you had everything under control. It seemed like everything's always fine with you. So I didn't think I needed to worry. Wasn't really the answer that I was looking for, but it also got me to thinking, okay, you know what? They're absolutely correct. They are right. I have never reached out to them when I've been struggling. I've also never appeared to be in distress to anyone. So it's kind of hard to expect people to react to me in that way without knowing anything is going on. So I don't want to say I started to blame myself, but I kind of started to blame my own actions. Like, yeah, people can be a bit proactive and just reach out and have concern for other people. But when you're used to someone like me that have always been in control of my life, or at least appear to be in control of my life, I've never really wavered when it comes to the way that I operate. I run a tight ship. I know what I want. When I want something, I go after it. I go and accomplish it. I don't back down from the things that I'm, working towards. So what else are they supposed to expect from me? This is all I've ever shown them. There's barely a failure that they have seen in me to be like, you know what? Maybe she needs some support right now. Or maybe I need to step up my, concern about this person. No, I've never been vulnerable enough with any of them for them to even care enough to take those steps. Hearing that from some of the closest people to me, it did kind of hurt a bit, because you just naturally expect people to think about you and want to make sure that you're good, especially when you're not. But I also had to take accountability for the fact that when I was struggling and I was falling apart emotionally inside and all of that, I wasn't reaching out and saying, hey, you know what? I'm really having a hard time right now. Mentally, I'm exhausted. Physically, I'm also exhausted and drained and all of those things. All of this could have been avoided if I had been a bit more vocal and shared with the people that were closest to me what my struggles were. It's not their job to mind read. After coming to terms with the fact that I've been wearing a mask for a really long time, the next step was to figure out why. Why have I been wearing this mask? Like, what is the cause of this? What created this persona that I've been exhibiting for so long? It was hard for me to even pinpoint straight away, because I'd been doing it for so long. It wasn't even clear to me at which point it took over. It definitely took a lot of conversations with my therapist, analyzing my childhood and my upbringing and the things that happened in my life for me to fully understand why I've been wearing a mask. So let's take a look at some of the ways that our childhood traumas help to create this strong persona that we wear every day. The first one that we're going to discuss is the survival mechanism. Most of us adopt a strong persona as a coping mechanism to deal with our traumas. We learn that showing any sign of vulnerability only leads to pain or neglect. So that pushes us to create these emotional walls to protect ourselves. I personally have been in a survival mindset for most of my life. Even though I grew up feeling a lot of love around me from my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, I realized at a young age that I didn't have that same sort of love that I felt the people that had their parents had. I yearned for the love of my mother and my father, just like any other child would. My grandparents did a great job filling that hole to the best of their ability, and I am forever grateful for how great they were to me, raising me. But at the same time, there's still a part of you missing when you don't have your biological parents in your life. That sense of abandonment, which at the time, I didn't know that that was abandonment. Now that I know, that sense of abandonment made me believe that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy of the love of my parents because why else would they leave me, right? If they loved me so much or if I was good enough for them, they wouldn't have left. As far back as my childhood, I had to grow up with the stigma that both of my parents left me. My mother left and my father left. And I felt I pretended enough that it didn't bother me that over time it just became normal that it didn't bother me. Or that's how I was able to deal with it was it don't bother me. Regardless of the reasons why our parents choose to go away or leave us with our family members or put you up for adoption, anything like that. The reasons, regardless of the reasons why they do that, whether the reason is good or whether the reason was bad, it doesn't even matter. Because I know for me, the reason does not change the fact that those feelings were still there. They could have left for the best reason in the world. That didn't change the feeling. As a child, all you know is that people have their mother and people have their fathers, and you don't. There's never a real right or wrong answer for this. I just think the feeling is always the same, regardless of what the reasoning is. As a child, not understanding life at that point, that's a big load to carry because you don't know what you're feeling. You just know that something's missing from me. It hurts me to see it. I know that I'm different, but I have to go on with life because that's what I have to do. And that's where it starts. Another way that the strong persona comes into play is with our fears of being vulnerable. When you've experienced trauma, it's very hard for you to put yourself in a space of vulnerability again because the last time you did that, you see what happened, right? You got hurt. So, why would I want to be vulnerable again? Why? So that I can go through that again? So we automatically start to build up this facade, or this we start to build up these walls to protect ourselves, because I'm not about to go through that again. I learned something from my mistakes. I don't want to experience that again. So my fears of being vulnerable has now created that strong persona. I have been fearful of being vulnerable for so long that it's second nature to me now. I protect myself even when I really don't have to anymore. I have gone through therapy so many different times, and if you've watched the therapy episode, you'll know that I've had 5 different therapists my entire life. So I've been through different therapy sessions, and I've learned so many different skills and tools and ways of dealing with things over my lifetime. And yet, and still, it took until recently for me to realize that I'm still battling things as if I'm in survival mode. And I'm not. I'm in a mode of thriving now. Hence the name for the podcast, From Surviving to Thriving, because I'm not in survival mode anymore. I've gone through that. I've learned from it. I've I've created all these tools and things to use to protect myself and to deal with things that those old ways aren't even necessary anymore. I no longer have to go to those rigid extremes to protect myself. I typically operate in a black or white type of zone. It's either I'm in or I'm out. I'm talking to you or I'm not talking to you. You're alive to me or you're dead to me. That's how I've operated for most of my life. And when I look back at the people that I've cut off, like, it takes a lot. I'll say this, it takes a lot for me to get to a point where I cut someone off. And when I say cut them off, I mean cut them off to the point where you're dead to me. Like, you no longer exist in my life. If I see you, I'm going to look right through you like you're not there. You don't exist in my world anymore. It takes a lot to get to that point. But for the people that just make me mad, that I argue with, that I fuss with, I still have a degree of black and white on how I deal with them, which is not even necessary. A perfect example of this is the relationship that I have with my mother. This is definitely a touchy subject for me. It's something that has been a huge part of my life. And I'm hoping that these next steps that I plan on taking can change that, because she's at the age where she is who she is. She's not going to change for anyone. I've accepted my mother for who she is. The issue that I've come to realize, and this actually just happened over the last 2 therapy sessions I had, I've come to realize that my mom has a tendency to trigger things in me. A lot of it obviously stems from our relationship in the past and how I've learned to deal with her in a way that it does not hurt me anymore. So in 2015, I went to therapy, and that is 2014, 2015. And during that therapy time frame, I had to learn how to deal with my mother. That way, whatever she did or whatever she does, it does not affect me in the way that it used to. So from 2015 up until now, I have mastered the way that my mom and I relationship works for me. I've mastered it. I've gotten it to the point where nothing that my mother does hurts me. And when I say hurts me, I'm speaking of the different emotions that comes with hurt, like the pain, the disappointment, the anger in some ways, and the feelings of not being good enough for her, or not feeling the love that she's trying to show me, because in my mind I don't recognize it and I don't feel it. So those things stopped bothering me. I changed my expectations of my mother, which changed her role in my life. That was the only defense mechanism, or that was the only survival mechanism that would work for me at that point in time. So, whenever my mom would do something that would trigger something in me, instead of getting angry and fussing with her and pleading and, trying to explain to her things, I usually just don't respond at all. I just be like, all right, here she go again. She doing whatever she normally does. And I would just pull away from her and go about my business. Currently, I've started to realize that I've been doing this same thing for the past almost 10 years, going on 10 years soon. I've been operating in this same way with my mother. My therapist over the last couple of weeks asked me, do I want to have a relationship with my mother? My response to her was, I do. She's my mother. Like, at the end of the day, family is family. As long as she's not hurting me the way that she used to hurt me, I don't have a problem having a relationship with my mother. After we spoke about the homework assignment, she again asked me, do you want to have a relationship with your mother? And it's your choice. Either way, you make the decision as to what it is that you want to do with that relationship. And I remember responding to her, and every time I would say something, she would ask me a question, and I would answer the question. And then she would give me a follow up question, and I would answer it. But I also felt like we were going in a circle, because she would come back to, do you want to have a relationship with your mother? And the last time that she asked me that question, I started to think, okay, why do we keep coming back to the same question? I thought I answered it, but maybe I'm not hearing myself. Maybe I'm talking in circles. Maybe I'm not expressing what it is that I need to say properly. So then I started to think about what I was saying before I said it. And as I started talking, I started to realize what I was missing from the whole conversation. I was saying to her that, yes, I want a relationship with my mother. But at the same time, I was saying that I was going to continue to operate the same way that I've been operating for the past 10 years, which obviously it works for me, but the majority of the time, I'm not talking to my mother. So that's not really having the type of relationship that I should be having with my mother. Especially if the point of all of this is because I'm saying I want to have a relationship with her. So I started to think about it some more. I started to realize that the defense mechanism that I've been using to protect myself, I didn't need it anymore. I was using a grenade where I only needed my fists. It was like fighting a battle where you don't need a grenade, but I was throwing a grenade into the fight instead of just throwing a fist. Because a lot of the things that my mom does is mostly just things that annoy me, or things that mothers do that piss you off, but it's not egregious enough for me to like not speak to her for 3 months. But here we are. It's been 3 months and we have not had a decent conversation. If it was someone else that did this, I don't think I would have reacted that way. And yes, there's some intricacies there where, as a mother, she could have definitely picked up the phone and called me, because if she picks up the phone and called me, I'm going to answer her. I'm never going to ignore the call of my mother. It's just not going to happen. I don't care how much she pisses me off or how much I don't want to deal with her. If she calls my phone, I'm going to answer her. But in her defense as well, it's because I have put up that wall to protect myself. So she's doing exactly what she knows I expect her to do, which is give me space. Give me that room to breathe, because back then I couldn't take any additional invasion of that space. But now, none of that stuff bothers me enough for me to keep her at bay like that. Is she perfect? No. Does she drive us crazy? Yes. Is she miserable? Absolutely. They all get it from my grandmother, all my aunts. And I think they all passed it down to all of us. But she's still my mother. She's always going to be my mother. What I've learned from the last couple of therapy sessions is the new me, I don't need to be in survival mode anymore when it comes to her. I don't need to be that overprotective of myself when it comes to her. The abilities that she used to have to affect me in that way no longer exist. So those walls that I'd put up from 10 years ago, they don't need to be there anymore. The point of all of this is to let go of that fear of being vulnerable, because a lot of the times we're fighting battles with the wrong tools. We don't need those tools anymore. We're past that. Like, I'm in a different space and I need to start to operate that way, especially when it comes to her. I can do better. And maybe by me doing better, it will allow her to learn to be better towards me. Maybe by me letting my guard down, it'll allow her to let her guard down too. Another thing that causes us to put on that strong persona is having that sense of being a perfectionist. And this comes from our past where we feel that we've been inadequate. And because of those feelings, we feel like we now have to compensate for those old feelings and become such a perfectionist at where we are now that people will forget that we used to be that person back then. That fear of people seeing and thinking about what we used to be or what we used to go through forces or pushes us to put on that I have it all together now, so I'm good persona. This is a big one for me as well. I work exceptionally hard for everything that I have. I know what it's like to not have and have to rely on other people. I've realized also that that makes me overcompensate now for those things that I lacked then. It's like I'm making up for not having the things that I used to have. Like now I'm overcompensating for it. Now, I have been blessed immensely with so many people that came into my life in my most vulnerable state when I was in need. And these people all came together and played so many different roles in my life. Like, I have so many men that have been father figures or brother figures, so many women that are big sisters and mothers, and even friendships where I have like a sisterhood that is, I can't even express how amazing my circle of female friends are. I'm not the type of person that has a whole bunch of friends, but I have a group of people that I've been close to for so long that we're family. Like, I don't look at these women and men like they're friends. They're my brothers, they're my sisters, big sister, little sister. We have such a bond that is unbreakable. Like, that's how my friendships are. There's a sense of loyalty to each other that can nothing come in between none of that. Like, my friends know, and I know that we ride for each other. We might be fussing at each other, but can't nobody else fuss at us. No, it's not how that works. So I've been lucky enough, and I don't even want to call it luck. I've been blessed enough to have that group of people that supported me throughout my life, and they're still in my life now. Some of them have opened their homes to me when I was homeless. They've fed me when I was hungry. They've supported me emotionally and financially when I didn't have. I would not be the person that I am today without the people that stood by me and took care of me when I was at my lowest, when I didn't have anything. They were there. Because I know what it's like to not have somewhere to call home, I make sure that my home is comfortable for other people. Like I mentioned earlier, I can be a little miserable, and I don't like to call it miserable. I like to call it particular about things. But I try to make people feel wanted and comfortable when they're around me. Like, I never want anyone to feel out of place because I know what that feeling's like, and it's never okay to feel like you're somewhere you're not wanted. I know what it's like to feel hungry. So I make sure there's always food in my house, no matter what it is. I will have food, so much food in my house that it goes bad. And that's not a good thing, by the way. But I'm not sure. That's just something that, again, I'm overcompensating, but it's because I know what it feels like when I was hungry. So there's always, if there's nothing else at my house, there's some food. You can find something to eat at this house. Even if you gotta cook, you can find something to eat. So I push myself to be a perfectionist or to even overcompensate on all of those things that I may have felt I lacked. The other reason that childhood traumas might create that strong persona is through isolation. Your traumas will make you feel a sense of shame and guilt, and that will sometimes make you feel isolated. That strong persona will come out of that in order for you to be able to shoulder those struggles by yourself. You don't want to tell other people about what it is that you're going through. So instead of sharing and asking for help, you tend to keep that close to yourself. And it is, you might be ashamed of whatever it is that you're feeling or you're going through or you're dealing with. And you also might just not want to burden the next person with those issues. So the best thing for you to do is just figure it out on your own. And I am so guilty of doing this. It's been something that I find to be the most difficult thing to do. Having to ask people for help, I would rather work 10 times harder. I would rather climb the highest mountain peak 500 times and come back down and carry everything up again by myself before I reach out and ask someone to help me. Why? Why am I like this? Like, why is it so hard to say, can you please help me? Can you help me, please? It is like one of the most difficult things to wrap my mind around. As I've thought about why I am this way, I've come to the realization that there's that fear of rejection when it comes to asking for help. There's also that shame that I have that would come with having to go to someone for help. And then I hate to feel like I'm imposing on people. It's very hard for me to do because I don't like it. I don't like it. I just don't like it. It's so bad that sometimes I realize it spills over into my work life. Like, I never want someone to have to pick up my slack. No. Mm-mm, mm-mm. It bothers me if I have to reach out to someone and be like, hey, I need you to help me with my work. Like, I hate that feeling. It's like, am I incapable? Like, am I just not good enough at my job? But the crazy part is, on the flip side of all of that, I love to take on the issues of others. I will help anybody that asks for help if I can help them without hesitation. Now, how does that make any sense? It makes zero sense. When I think about it, I'm so afraid of asking for help, but I'm one of the first person that will be willing to help someone else. Having difficulty expressing your emotions is also another one of those reasons why we create that strong persona. I always say that I'm an emotional person, and that's not to be confused with actually expressing your emotions. There's a big difference that I had to come to realize. I'm emotional in the sense that if I see someone crying or in an emotional state, I tend to start crying. It happens when I watch TV or even a movie. But at the same time and in the same breath, when it comes to the hurt from my traumas, those tend to get folded up in nice little neat pieces of paper and they get tucked away so far back there somewhere in my mind. Those are the emotions that are associated with resentment, disappointment, the feeling of unworthiness, the shame, disgust with myself, and worthlessness. Those emotions are the hardest ones to admit and say out loud. They're the hardest ones to share with people. So those are the ones that I typically mask with something else, and they tend to come out looking like strength, but really it's a facade. Because where you're seeing what you believe to be strength, that's actually me feeling all of those emotions that I just mentioned, but I'm trying to suppress those and make them appear to be something that they're not. The final point that I have to share on the things that helps to create these strong have it all together persona is the impact that these childhood traumas have on our relationships that cause us to create the persona in the first place. This was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my mind around at first, but the more I thought about it and as I was going through my therapy sessions, this became pretty clear to me because I realized that the things from my past not only affected how I my it not only affected my relationship with say my mother and my siblings, but it spills over into all the other relationships in my life, especially my intimate relationships with my partners over time. It creates that atmosphere where it's like I'm operating in protection mode all the time. I remember my therapist asking me one time if I believe that I'm controlling. If she had asked me that same question, I would say a few months before this conversation, I probably would have told her, absolutely not. I'm not controlling. No, never. I'm not a controlling person. Yep. That's probably you. You're probably thinking the same thing. You're not controlling. Well, guess what? You probably are. I know. Take your time. Let that sink in for a second. We are, but for good reason. There's a reason why we are the way that we are. I had heard in previous relationships that I've had that I had control issues. Surprise, surprise. Of course, I didn't agree. I didn't think I was controlling. I wasn't going to admit that because to me, it wasn't true at that point in time. However, my answer to my therapist that day was yes, absolutely. I am controlling. I believe I am. Controlling in the sense that I feel the need to protect myself and not be vulnerable in my relationships. It was not something that I was conscious of, but it was so ingrained in me for so long that it was just a part of who I was and how I operate on a normal basis. So to me, I wasn't doing anything that I thought was controlling. All I was doing was being myself and protecting myself. When in reality, I was controlling my relationships. I was controlling them because I needed a sense of predictability. I could protect myself from being hurt if I knew what was going to be happening and I could control the environment and who was in it and how they were presenting to me. I had to always operate in a position of strength out of the fear of being looked at as weak. I didn't want to be walked all over. That was not going to be okay with me. But in the same sense, I also needed to be the person that was needed in order to quell that fear of rejection and abandonment from my partner. So, in order to feel like they weren't going to abandon me, I had to create some controls around the situation where their need for me was more important than abandoning me. That sounds kind of crazy. I mean, I'm admitting it. It sounds kind of crazy, right? Yeah, kind of crazy. These things have all managed to show up in so many different areas of my life that this strong persona is going to be something hard to shake. But there are ways to dismantle the persona. So let's explore how to dismantle this strong persona. The first thing we should do is acknowledge your feelings, give yourself permission to feel. It's okay to not have it all together. It's okay to not be okay. Let's just acknowledge those uncomfortable things. Once we have acknowledged them, we need to decide that it's okay to feel them. It's okay to feel this way. The next thing we can do is be open with the people that love us and that we love. Like, these are the people that have supported us our entire lives, or these are the people that have shown up for you. You have a level of trust in them. You know they got your back. So be open with them, share with them. They're not mind readers. They're not going to know that you are going through something unless you share. The next thing to do is to practice self-compassion. We are so good at treating people with kindness and giving people grace and meeting people where they are and uplifting them. But then when it comes to ourselves, we think we just need to pretend like everything's fine. No, we don't have to do that. It's okay to give ourselves the same amount of grace that we give other people. The other thing to do is to change our view on what it means to be strong. I think we have this warped view of what strength looks like. And unfortunately, that's not real. Being strong is being able to be vulnerable, is being able to be open, to be able to share your struggles, fix them, work with others. That's strength. Strength is not putting on a mask and pretending like everything's great when you're falling apart inside. That's not strength. Strength is facing those issues that we have head on and moving on from them. And the final thing that I will say is to seek help. Go get help from a therapist, a religious leader, a support group, a person that you know can mentor you and help you get out of that strong persona mindset. Without that help, you might not take that mask off. Because when you take the mask off, you're going to see some things that don't look pretty at all. They're ugly. They're the ugly parts of us that we've tried to hide for so long that when you take it off, it might scare you. It scared me. It actually made me look at myself several times and said, who am I? I've asked this in my therapy sessions. I'm like, who am I? Who is this person? Like, I've asked my therapist, I'm like, can I just blow everything up that I know and just start over? Because I was so, it's like so embarrassing. It's so, ugh. Like, I don't want to be that person. Why do I even have that person a part of me? Yeah, that strength is facing those ugly, ugly parts of yourself, owning them and letting go of them. Because after you've owned it, it don't even matter no more. That shame and that guilt and that disgust and all of that don't matter. Like, I can speak about all of these things to you guys now because I faced them already. I've said them out loud, not only to myself, to my therapist, to my siblings, to my friends, to whoever asks, whoever I feel can benefit from the information. I've said it enough where I'm comfortable with it now. It doesn't bother me the way that it used to. I don't have to project this image of I'm this strong person. No, I have weaknesses, a lot of them. I need help. I struggle a lot emotionally. I have to see myself in a different light. I had to reparent myself. I had to unlearn a lot of bad behavior. And in order to become a better version of yourself, where you don't need to pretend to be this strong person, you have to become vulnerable. And that means taking that mask off. So let's go ahead and sum this episode up. And I want to sum this up by saying that I know for a fact that I perfected that strong, have it all together persona over time to the point where the closest people to me sometimes didn't recognize that I had a lot going on with me, that I was broken. They didn't know because I did not allow them to see that side of me. I have finally given myself the permission to take the mask off, unveil the person behind it. I now know that I don't need to be the strong person all the time. Showing strength is not a bad thing. It's not. Let's make that clear. It's just when we are using it to cover something, when we're masking something, it's a facade that we have going. That's when it's really an issue. I don't have to pretend anymore. I've realized that sometimes the strong person becomes weak. And that's where having a good support system is so important. And I'm lucky enough to have an amazing support system. I am much, much kinder to myself. I'm doing the things that make me happy. I've also realized that the strength actually comes from being open and honest, not only with myself, but with the people that are in my life. And the main part of all of this is I'm never alone on this journey. I always have some backup somewhere. Keep in mind that Dismantling this strong persona is not a destination. It doesn't end. It's something that you're going to continue to do the rest of your life. It's a journey. It's never going to end. This did not come to us overnight, and it definitely ain't about to leave overnight either. You will continuously have to remind yourself that it's okay to be vulnerable and it's okay to ask for help. Tune into next week's episode where we will discuss embracing your inner child. I want to give y'all a heads up that the next few weeks of episodes are kind of tough for me to work through. And mainly because they touch on topics for me that are pretty sensitive and things that are deep for me. So strap yourself in a little bit because the ride may get a little bit bumpy because these are deep issues that we all experience, and sometimes they hit a nerve when you have to say them out loud again. So I'm saying this to say you may find yourself in a state of roller coasters of emotions because something I might say may trigger you. And I don't want to trigger anyone in a negative way with any of these episodes that are coming, but I do feel like there are things that I need to address in order to be authentic with you guys. So, next week is about embracing your inner child. I hope that this episode inspires you to embrace vulnerability and redefine what it is to be strong and to have it all together. If you have experienced this in your life and would like to share how you are working on it or how you have already dismantled that strong persona, please leave a comment below. It may be impactful to someone else's life. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe so that you will not miss any of these episodes. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.